السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أنبياء الله جميعا، وعلى سيدهم وخاتمهم حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد، وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المنتجبين، والخلص من أصحابه الميامين، ومن تبعهم بإحسان وإيمان إلى يوم الدين. My friends, Ramadan Mubarak on you. May Allah accept your deeds. Tonight we come into another report or hadith that has been attributed to the Prophet, which does not make sense, but it is mentioned in the books of hadith in many references on both sides, the school of Khulafa and the school of Ahlul Bayt. And that hadith is Shawiruhunna. The hadith has been attributed to the Prophet, that the Prophet said regarding women, Shawiruhunna wa khalifuhun. Consult with women, but reject them and disobey them, ignore them and refuse them and neglect them. Consult with them, but then ignore them. فَإِنَّ فِي خِلَافِهِنَّ الْبَرَكَةِ. Because indeed, when you disobey women, you are a blessed person. You receive blessings. And that is contrary, first of all, to this book, to the Holy Quran. If we open the Holy Quran, we have a whole chapter, chapter 42. And that chapter is called Surah Shura. Surah Shura here, وَالَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا. When God speaks about men and women, both, not just men. God says, and those وَالَّذِينَ يَجْتَنِبُونَ كَبَائِرَ الْإِثْمِ وَالْفَوَاحِشِ وَإِذَا مَا غَضِبُوا هُمْ يَغْفِرُونَ. The characters of the believers, men and women both, that they avoid and eschew the cardinal sins and the shameful sins, and when they get angry, they forgive. وَالَّذِينَ اسْتَجَابُوا لِرَبِّهِمْ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. And those who respond to the call of their Lords. They establish their prayers, they pay, they establish their prayers, وَأَمْرُهُمْ شُورَى بَيْنَهُمْ. And their affair is a counsel among them. Their affair being counsel among them. This is chapter 42, which is named Shura. The whole chapter is called Consultation and Shura. And it's not only speaking to men, but speaking to men and women, the whole community of believers, both genders. So God says, our affairs, and the affairs here, my friends, is not the Khilafah. It's not the leadership in Islam. Leadership in Islam is not the affairs. Excluded from the word affairs. Affairs means our political, our economic, our social affairs and relationships. We consult with each other. Men and women consult. Women are not excluded. Women are included in this verse. But when it comes to the Khilafah, Allah says in chapter 28, Surah Al-Qasas, verse number 68, وَرَبُّكَ يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيَخْتَارُ مَا كَانَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَرَةُ. It is He, your Lord, who creates whoever He wills, and yakhtar, and chooses. Chooses here means, according to the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, chooses for leadership. God chooses among His creation people who are leaders and Imams and Caliphs. This matter is not left for the community to decide. God willing, we're going to elaborate on this concept in few more days from now, inshallah, when we speak about Khilafah and Imamah in Islam. So the Prophet so this is the Quran. The Quran says consultation, shura. When you have an affair, any important affair of your life, then you have to consult with one another. And then the Prophet emphasizes the concept of shura. And when we come to the Quran, my friends, the Quran says the husband and the wife have to consult with each other. And this is second chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse number 233. فإن أرادا فصالا عن تراض منهما وتشاور فلا جناح عليهما. If the husband and wife, they wanted to wean the kids, or some commentators say this is about divorce, either weaning kids or divorce, they have to have a mutual consent and consultation. عن تراض منهما وتشاور. Both. عن تراض منهما وتشاور. تراض means mutual consent. وتشاور means mutual consultation. So nowhere we find in this book, the Holy Quran, that man should not consult women, or they consult them but then they reject them, they disobey them, or they ignore them. Nowhere in this book. So, but this hadith has been mentioned in many Sunni references, and one of them is Al-Jami' al-Saghir, on behalf of Aisha, the wife of the Prophet. She said, عن النبي طاعة المرأة ندامة. When you obey your wife, when you listen to your wife, you're going to regret it. Nadama. This hadith that says, شاوروهن وخالفوهن, consult with them and then ignore them, as I said, it's found in Sunni and Shia references. The Sunni references Ibn Abi al-Hadid al-Mu'tazili في شرح النهج. He mentioned that in chapter 18, verse 199. And also in the Shia references, Makarim al-Akhlaq mentions this hadith. And also in one of the important Sunni references by the name of Tazkiratul Mawdu'at, Al-Fatni. The author's name is Al-Fatni. He says, وَرُوِيَ عَنْ عُمَرَ بْنِ الْخَطَّابِ خَالِفُ النِّسَاءَ فَإِنَّ فِي خِلَافِهِنَّ الْبَرَكَةِ. It has been narrated on behalf of Umar that خَالِفُ النِّسَاء, disagree and ignore, or do exactly the opposite of what they suggest. So when you ignore them, فَإِنَّ فِي خِلَافِهِنَّ الْبَرَكَةِ. There is much blessing when you ignore women. Now, when we read the Islamic history and Islamic tradition, we find out that Umar ibn al-Khattab had a problem with women. This is not me. This is Sahih al-Bukhari here. Sahih al-Bukhari. Umar ibn al-Khattab has been portrayed in major Sunni sources, such as Bukhari and others, as being misogynist. He hated women. He could not stand them. Let me read for you this story that Bukhari narrates, and it is in Kitabu Fada'ili Ashab al-Nabi, in a chapter called The Virtue of the Companions of the Prophet, and he speaks about Manaqib Umar ibn al-Khattab. He considered this story to be manqaba, a virtue of the second caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab, and it is here. Let me read it for you, my friends. It says that the story is long. Let me summarize it. One day, a group of women gathered around the Prophet, and they raised their voice. وعنده نسوة من قريش يكلمنه ويستكثرنه عالية أصواتهن على صوته. A group of women of Quraysh sitting with the Prophet, apparently in his house, having discussion with him, but their voice is above the voice of the Prophet. Umar استأذن. Umar came and sought permission and came. فلما استأذن عمر قمنا فبادرنا الحجاب. قمنا فبادرنا الحجاب. Do you listen to this? It means that they were not wearing hijab when they were sitting with the Prophet. But once they heard about Umar coming inside the room, they put on the scarf. فبادرنا الحجاب. فأذن له رسول الله فدخل عمر ورسول الله يضحك. Umar came, the Prophet started to smile. فقال عمر أضحك الله سنك يا رسول الله. Inshallah, you always are smiling, O the Prophet of God. What's going on? He was asking. The Prophet said, عجبت من هؤلاء اللاتي كنا عندي. Those women who are here, they were talking loud. فلما سمعنا صوتك ابتدرنا الحجاب. Once they heard your voice and you are coming, they put on the scarf. What does that mean? It means they did not wear a scarf in the front of the Prophet. But once they heard Omar, because his faith apparently is stronger than the faith of the Prophet, so they put on the scarf. And then listen to the rest of the hadith. قال عمر فأنت أحق أن يهبن يا رسول الله. They should fear you more than me. They should respect you more than me. They should put on the hijab in front of you, not just me. ثم قال عمر يا عدوات أنفسهن. Here Umar ibn al-Khattab is turning to those women and says, oh, the enemies of yourselves. أتهبنني ولا تهبن رسول الله. You fear me, you respect me, you have reverence for me, and you have no reverence for the Prophet. فقلنا نعم. They said, yes. أنت أفض وأغلظ من رسول الله. أنت أفض وأغلظ. You are more severe, more harsh, and more hard-hearted from the Prophet. You are severe and hard-hearted. And this is considered virtue of the second caliph, that he was severe, he was harsh, he was not lenient, he was hard-hearted. Whereas God says to the Prophet in this book, وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. God says being severe and hard-hearted is not a virtue, is not a good trait. Because if you, Muhammad, had you been harsh with people around you and hard-hearted, they would have left you and you would have stayed alone. So this is one story of Umar's treatment of women. Now we come to another story that is narrated by the son of Umar ibn al-Khattab, and that is the Sahabi Abdullah ibn Umar, again in Sahih al-Bukhari, my friends, in a chapter called Al-Wisatu bin Nisa. Wisatu bin Nisa means take care of women. But listen, Abdullah ibn Umar says in this story that كنا نتقي الكلام والانبساط إلى نسائنا على عهد النبي. During the time of the Prophet, we were careful when we spoke with our wives. We were careful. But then when the Prophet died, هيبة أن ينزل فينا شيء, because we feared that if we became harsh-hearted with our wives, then God is going to send a verse in the Quran regarding us. فلما توفي النبي تكلمنا وانبسطنا. When the Prophet died, we took our freedom in addressing our women. تكلمنا. You could lash at your wife, you could say something, because here no more a prophet. So this gives you an example of how women were treated and how they were perceived at that time, during the time of the Prophet, by some of his companions. Something else in the Bible, my friends, I want to share with you regarding women. And I hope our Christian friends also read the Bible, the Holy Bible. They have to research the Holy Bible and see what it says about women and how it does perceive women. In book of the first book of Kings here, the first book of Kings, which is part of the Old Testament, it says a story, which I can't believe this story. I don't think this is an authentic story in the Bible. The story says King David, when he got old, one day he was cold and he wanted to warm himself. So they brought him something like blankets, but he was still cold. So they suggested to him, let's bring you a young lady from Israel and she would sit in your lap and you will get warm. So women were perceived as being toys for the service, for the entertainment, for the enjoyment of men. This is how the Old Testament perceived women. The first book of Kings, now King David was old and stricken in years, and they covered him with the clothes, but he got no heat. He was still cold. Whereof his servant said unto him, Let there be sought for my lord the king a young virgin, and let her stand before the king, and let her cherish him, and let her lay in thy bosom. It means she comes and she lay down in his lap. Okay? That my lord the king may get heat. And then verse number 3 says, so they sought for a fair damsel. Damsel means a young woman. Throughout all the coasts, the entire country of Israel, and found Abishag, a Shanamanite. Her name is Abishag, from a tribe of Shamanites, and brought her to the king. Verse number 4 says, King David, and the damsel was very fair. Very fair means very beautiful. And cherished the king, and administered to him, but the king knew her not. He didn't know her, but she took care of him. So now King David, his majesty, is warm when they brought him a young virgin lady from Israel. This is how in the old days perceived women. These are the scriptures, previous scriptures, and this is the hadith, Sahih al-Bukhari and other books. So here, my friends, and people do not go, believe me, people do not research the hadith. Most people do not read these books. Most people are unaware of what is going on in these books. It's about blind following. Blind following. 99% of the Muslims do not research their religion, do not know what is right and what is wrong, do not know what is weak and acceptable and what is authentic. They don't know. Let me give you an example about Salatul Taraweeh, my friends. Now, Salatul Taraweeh is very important in the month of Ramadan. Some people may miss their daily prayers, but they cannot miss the Taraweeh. And listen to the story of Taraweeh. Taraweeh was made by Umar ibn al-Khattab. This is Sahih al-Bukhari, Kitab Salat al-Taraweeh. Let me share this hadith with you. Okay? عن ابن شهاب عن عروة بن الزبير عن عبد الرحمن بن عبد القاري أنه قال خرجت مع عمر بن الخطاب. So this is a Sahabi. His name is Abdul Rahman ibn Abdul Qari. He says, I came out with Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu laylatan fi Ramadan ila al-masjid, one of the nights to the mosque of the Prophet. فإذا الناس أوزاع متفرقون. People are divided into groups. يصلي الرجل لنفسه ويصلي الرجل فيصلى بصلاته. Someone praying individually, another one is praying, and some people are behind him. فقال عمر إني أرى لو جمعت هؤلاء على قارئ واحد. My opinion, if I can gather all those who are praying in the mosque so they can follow one person in the prayers, لكان أمثل, it would be better. ثم عزم فجمعهم. So he decided to do that. فجمعهم على أبي بن كعب. He decided to make Ubay ibn Ka'b the imam of the prayers, the Taraweeh, and then they pray behind him. ثم خرجت معه ليلة أخرى. The same narrator says, I went again with the second caliph Umar ibn al-Khattab another night to the mosque. وَالنَّاسُ يُصَلُّونَ بِصَلَاةِ قَارِئِهِمْ. The congregation are following one reciter, one imam. قال عمر نعم البدعة هذه. نعم البدعة. See here. نِعْمَ الْبِدْعَةُ هَذِهِ. This is the best innovation, the best bid'ah. He says about it, it's bid'ah. وَالَّتِي يَنَامُونَ عَنْهَا أَفْضَلُ. Okay? الَّتِي يَنَامُون means Salatul Layl. So this is, my friends, Omar himself is saying that this is bid'ah. This is innovation. This is not the sunnah of the Prophet. Go and ask your friends, your neighbors. How many of them know that Salatul Taraweeh is not the sunnah of the Prophet? How many? Not even 1% know. They think that the Prophet did these prayers. And in these books we have, I'm going to show you in the future nights, that the Prophet himself said, these prayers during the nights of Ramadan has to be done individually in your homes. And he himself did it in his house. He didn't leave his house, according to Aisha, his wife. Aisha said, when he went to the mosque to do it by himself individually, people gathered around behind him. He forbade them. He said, no, this is an individual prayers. This is not jama'ah. Do it in your home. But when they refused, the following nights the Prophet started doing these prayers, these nawafil, inside his home, not in the mosque, not in a jama'ah. Now it is done in jama'ah. This is against the sunnah of the Prophet. Let's go on with our subject about consulting women. Now, is this hadith acceptable? شاوروهن وخالفوهن. Is it acceptable? No. Our researchers, our scholars of Ahlul Bayt say, الحديث لا أصل له. This type of hadith is baseless. وهو مرسل وضعيف. ضعيف means does not fit in the categories of authentic or good or dependable. Mursal means it is forwarded on. I mentioned in the past, mursal means that the tradition does not have a complete chain of narrators. One or more in the chain of narrators are missings. Either missings or we don't recognize them. So this hadith becomes mursal, heard. And people do not accept such hadith. So the hadith that says, the hadith that claims that the Prophet said to his companions, consult with your wives or with women, and then ignore them, is baseless. The Prophet would not say such thing. And it is really weird. You know why it's weird? Because the Prophet says, شاوروهن وخالفوهن. Go consult with them, seek their opinion, seek their advice, but then ignore them and refuse what they say to you. This means that women are always wrong. If we accept this hadith, this fabricated hadith, it means that women are always wrong. Because the Prophet says, go ask their opinion. Once they tell you their opinion, then do exactly the opposite. And the Prophet does not say that. The Prophet that we know him through his treatment of women around him, the respect he had for women, and the consultation he had with his wives, and with Khadija. Khadija, the wife of the Prophet, was the most senior advisor of the Prophet. The Prophet used to consult Khadija on every matter. He would not disobey her. He would not refuse her. He would not ignore her. He would respect her opinion. He would accept her opinion. So the Prophet would not utter such hadith. Besides, if the Prophet says to us, to our community, to his community, go ask your wife and then ignore her, this is going to create tension in the family. This is going to create war in the family. This is going to create misunderstanding between the husband and the wife. Imagine you go to your wife, would you like to try this? For 3 days only. Go ask her and then do exactly the opposite. What will happen after 3 days? Definitely one of you is going to call 911. This is going to create tension. This is disrespect for women. How come the Prophet say, go ask her, shawiruhun, and then wakhalifuhun, and then ignore them and neglect them? He would not say that. Because the Prophet himself says in one of his hadith, which I have here, which is page 448, again in Sahih al-Bukhari, 448. Let me find it for you. Istawsu bin nisa'i khayra. The Prophet himself says, Istawsu bin nisa'i khayra. Meaning here, I found it. Al-wasatu bin nisa. The Prophet says, Wastawsu bin nisa'i khayra. Is in Kitabun Nikah, Babul Wasati bin Nisa in Sahih al-Bukhari. So if the Prophet is asking us to take care of women and treat them well, with respect, with recognition, he would not conflict himself and comes later on and say, consult them, but then disobey them and ignore them. He wouldn't say that. The Prophet wants the family to be together. The Prophet himself says, "Ma buniya bina'un fil Islam ahabbu ila Allah ta'ala min at-tazwij." No institution has been built on earth dearer and closer to God than the institution of marriage and family. And the Prophet intends every peace and every stability and harmony for the families. He does not intend to create commotion and disturbance. So it's impossible for him to say, go and consult your wife or consult women and then ignore them. He would not say that. This is not the saying of the Prophet. These are not the akhlaq, the manners of someone who came to bring about peace and harmony and togetherness in the societies and in the families. We have in this book, in the Holy Quran, we have places that speaks about men consulting women. We have it in the Quran. Men consulting women. Now, one example of that. قالت إحداهما, the daughter of Shu'aib, Jethro, Prophet Shu'aib, is saying, advising her father, consulting with her father, advising her father. قالت إحداهما يا أبت استأجره إن خير من استأجرت القوي الأمين. She's saying to her father, oh father, I want you to hire, I suggest to you to hire Moses because he's strong and trustworthy. And he's a prophet, the father is a prophet. Shu'aib is a prophet who lived in Madian, which is today's Ma'an in Jordan. So he's a prophet and he accepts the opinion of his daughter. He does not ignore her. He does not refuse her. He does not disobey her. This is one example. The second example is that Khadija was the best advisor to the Prophet. Fatima al-Zahra was the best advisor to Ali ibn Abi Talib. Zainab alayhi salam was the best advisor to Imam Hussein in Medina and in Karbala in the occasion of Ashura. She was his senior advisor. He will come and seek her opinion. These are examples for us. Today, even in Muslim countries, let alone non-Muslim, we have women, educated women, wise women, who are senior advisors in politics, in finance, in economy, in social affairs, in medicine, in all fields of life, in religion, in theology, in philosophy. We have senior advisors. We have top advisors of many administrations are women in Muslim countries. Many of them are consultants. When you give her a chance to go and study, when society respects women, yes, you can trust their opinion. But when a society deprives them from education, from respect, from being in the right place, when they are always marginalized, always pushed away, always being told, your place is only your room. You cannot meet any person. You cannot go to school. You cannot learn anything. Definitely in that case, how can you consult her? Because she knows nothing. because she knows nothing in that case. So when it comes to consultation, Quran and the Prophet ﷺ do not differentiate between men and women. It is not a gender-based issue. It's about understanding. It's about intelligence. It's about farsightedness. It's about experience. It's about education. You go to a person who has education, who has experience, who has wisdom, who has knowledge, be it male or female. It could be a male, it could be a female. And sometimes you go to a male who doesn't have experience, who doesn't know what to tell you. So you should not consult with that person, even if he's a male, even if she's a female. So it is not gender-based, my friends. It's not gender-based. The Quran also speaks about a lady who was appointed as a king, accepted by her community, and that is 3,000 years ago. The queen of Sheba, Bilqis. She said she was not reckless, she was not arrogant, and she was intelligent, she had reason. Therefore she would say, مَا كُنْتُ قَاطِعَةً أَمْرًا حَتَّى تَشْهَدُونَ. She tells her community, I'm not going to make a decision until you are present and I consult with you. So when you give her the opportunity to excel, she could be the best advisor. When you deprive her, she has nothing. فاقد الشيء لا يعطيه. She has nothing to provide. And we understand from the Quran and the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that you may consult your wives and ask them. And in some books I read, كان رسول الله إذا أراد حربا in Medina, when he wanted to leave for a military expedition, جمع نساءه فاستشارهن. He would gather his wives and he would consult with them. So he is the role model for us. Tomorrow, inshallah, we're going to speak about another sensitive subject, which I am asked about it, and I am sure many other scholars are asked, and that is whether the voice of women is awrah. Awrah means pudendum, an intimate part of her. She should cover it always, or it's okay for men to hear her voice. This will be the subject of tomorrow. I leave you with the protection of God. Stay healthy, stay safe. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.